and welcome to our Coursera Educator Community Webinar series. Today's webinar is on shifting from the classroom to remote teaching during COVID-19. My name is Dennis Saunier. I lead the teaching and learning team at Coursera. Our team consults with academic and industry partners on how to best utilize learning science and learner platform data to inform the instructional design of courses, projects, and degrees created for the platform. As we get started, I just would like to say that solidarity is actually one of Coursera's core company values, and I know it's with a sense of solidarity that we're all here today to help each other meet the rising challenge of COVID-19 and its impact on education. So we're grateful for all of you coming together here today to share lessons learned and best practices with each other. So a few logistical notes as we get started. I'm going to introduce or hand over to our two panelists in a second, but the format is going to be that our panelists are going to interview each other quickly and then open it up for general discussion. So at any time, you can use the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom controls to introduce yourself to your fellow attendees. And then when we hit the general discussion portion of the event, you can click on the raise hand button at the bottom of the Zoom controls if you'd like to actually ask your question or share your feedback on video, and I will kind of queue that up and monitor that. Or you can also hit the Q&A button if you'd like to type in a question or comment that you'd like me to relay in. And so with that, I am joined today by two of my colleagues from the teaching and learning team, Adam Hodges and Linlin Xia, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Great, thanks Dennis. Hello everyone, my name's Adam. I'm joining you today from my workspace in my home in Boulder, Colorado. It's a cold and snowy day here. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Colorado, and I also do teaching and learning consulting for Coursera. So I'm kind of coming at today's conversation from both of those perspectives, but primarily wearing my hat as a faculty member who, like many of you, I think, who are joining, teaches on campus and has sort of been thrust into this situation due to COVID-19, where now we are all of a sudden quickly trying to shift to remote teaching. So I look forward to sharing some of the things that have worked for me, some of the things that haven't worked for me. And I think more importantly, we really want to make this a conversation, not just between Linlin and me, but a conversation with all of you as well, because I know we have a lot of expertise among the participants here in this webinar today. And we're looking forward to learning from you and drawing from and sharing that expertise. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Linlin.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. My name is Linlin Xia. I'm also on the teaching and learning team at Coursera. I lead the 4-credit learning design group. In the past few years, I have the privilege to work with over university partners to put their bachelor degree and master degrees online. And I have been working closely with the instructors and instructional designers to brainstorm online learning activities or develop effective assessments. So I'm very excited to virtually meet all of you today and share what I have learned in the past few years. And also to Adam's point, more importantly, I want to learn from you guys what you have seen and found effective for online learning these days. So I hope this is a great community conversation and we can all go through this together. So to get started, I'm going to launch a few polling questions just to better understand where you come from and how you are teaching online right now. So everyone should be able to see the polling questions right now. If you don't see it, give us a note in the chat and we can help you with that. I will just give that a few seconds to have more answers coming in. I see the numbers are going up. All right. Awesome. So I think I will let the poll continue and at the same time start a conversation with Adam, so we can have those two things going in parallel. And meanwhile, as Adam mentioned, we truly hope this is a dialogue between all of us. So I will ask a few questions to Adam to get his experience, but feel free to chime in the chat to share your experience to those questions as well. So Adam, first of all, I know you have been teaching online for a while. So could you tell us what courses you are teaching right now and how is the experience so far?
Yeah, great. So, so I'm actually not teaching. Well, I'm not supposed to be teaching online. I am now, after past 3 weeks or so. But I'm teaching a language and culture course at University of Colorado this semester. It's a senior level course, mainly anthropology and linguistics majors. And it's a course of, we have 39 students enrolled. So kind of a medium-sized course. I do try to do a lot of interaction in the classroom with the students and breakout groups and small group discussions. So that was one concern that I had as we had to shift to the online environment, which we did. We did just over a week before our spring break. We had spring break last week, and then we came back on Monday to resume after spring break. So I guess I've been now just over 2 weeks remotely doing the remote classes. I feel like I was pretty lucky with my situation because I make quite a bit of use of our Canvas learning management system. And so the way that I have the course set up is I have weekly online quizzes that are due at the end of each week. I have a weekly discussion board post that is due by noon on Thursday of each week. So those things were already done online. And then we come to class 3 days a week and I do a little bit of lecturing and we do some discussion. You know, I've sort of, as I've evolved in my teaching over the many years, I've really tried to move away from spending an hour just lecturing. So I usually always try to limit my lecturing to 30 minutes at the most and really involve the class in discussion for the rest of that time. Fortunately, also, I think we're pretty lucky in that the way this course is set up over the semester, most of the concepts and key ideas that I present during the lectures we're pretty much have covered everything by the time we get to spring break, so that when we come back from spring break, we're really focusing in on full-length ethnographies that lend themselves to more discussion. So we're sort of at that point of the semester. So with that said, what I'm trying to do now with synchronous Zoom sessions is to have that type of interaction that we would have in the classroom. And I think Zoom really allows for that. There are many tools. It's different, obviously, than being live in a classroom, but there are ways to facilitate that interaction on Zoom. And I've made use of the breakout groups. So I'm able to assign random breakout groups every class. And I found that whereas maybe in the classroom, I'll do small little buzz groups of maybe 2 to 3 students, I've actually created breakout rooms of about 6 students. It tends to work a little bit better, it seems like, in the online environment. You know, let them go off for 15 minutes or so and discuss a topic. I'm able to come around and join the individual rooms, and then we get back together as a class and discuss. So I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about any of the tools of Zoom that I've used that have worked or haven't worked well for me, but maybe that's just kind of a starting point to get the discussion going.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear you have adapted your courses to an online format, and so far it has been running smoothly. So I want to hear more from you, like during this shift, what has been challenging for you and where you see actually more opportunities or the opposite or the positive side of teaching online?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest challenges have to do with the situation surrounding COVID-19 and the personal lives and the personal issues that students are dealing with, just like all of us are dealing with. You know, so students, not only have they had to shift to taking courses online, but they've also had to move out of campus dorms if they're living in campus. A lot of them who even lived in the community have now gone home with their family to be with their family during this time. Some of those are international students who've gone overseas. I did a poll the other day after we came back from spring break just to get a sense of where all of my students are right now. I think we were pretty lucky. Most of my class is still located somewhere in Colorado, so we're all in the same time zone, but there are some exceptions to that. So that is one issue to consider if you're doing synchronous classes. How can you maybe come up with alternative arrangements for students who live halfway around the world now and might have trouble joining those synchronous sessions? So those are things that we're working through. Internet connection is another issue that, not all students might have reliable internet connections or even a space in their home to access the classes. So I know I have a lot of students who are now at home with their families. Both of their parents are working remotely. They have siblings who are taking classes remotely. They're trying to find space in the home as well as bandwidth on their internet connection coming into their home to juggle everybody's schedules. So I think it's important to be aware of those issues that the students are dealing with and be as flexible as possible during this time. Like I said, we have a lot of things set up already on our learning management system that they can do asynchronously. If they're not able to join our live discussion classes, then I provide opportunities for them to engage with the topic asynchronously if needed.
Yeah, I think you already touched upon a little bit on this, like you have both synchronous live session and also asynchronous learning materials they can engage by themselves. So could you tell a little bit more, like what you see as the pros and cons of synchronous sessions versus asynchronous sessions?
Yeah, I really think one of the pros of synchronous sessions is the ability to facilitate discussion. And if that's something that you value and you're used to in your classroom, then I think synchronous sessions are going to allow you to try to mimic that as much as possible. If you have a large lecture class, if you're teaching 200 students and you tend to just, they come into the lecture hall and you're lecturing, I think doing that synchronously on Zoom may be a little difficult. I would actually suggest maybe trying to do a pre-recorded lecture video or series of videos that you could post on your learning management system that they can access asynchronously. I know I've talked with some of the students in my classes. I'm just trying to get a sense of how this is working out for them, not just in my class, but also in their experience overall. And some of the comments that students have shared with me has been that in their larger lecture classes that have been trying to do live Zoom lectures, they said it was really not working so well. So maybe that's something to think about. So pros and cons to both, but I think it comes down to what is it you're trying to achieve with the class and then choose the appropriate method to do that.
Awesome, thank you. And I know another question top on a lot of instructors' mind at this moment is, I have this live session, but it seems not active as I have in the classroom. So what are some techniques you can use to engage your students in the synchronous session? So could you share some your learnings and tips in the process? Yeah,
I think that's a good question. And to be honest, I'm lucky because I've been using Zoom as a consultant for, over a year or two. So when I first started using Zoom, I wasn't that comfortable with it. It sort of takes some time to get comfortable using the online technology to sort of create and recreate that same type of interaction. And certainly the students are not going to have experience with that. So it's going to be a little awkward for them at first as well. And I found that to be the case, but what I try to do is just like with class, I really value the time before class and after class where I could just talk informally with students, give them opportunities to talk about things they're interested in, ask questions. So I always try to join early and I always stay late. So I'm always the last person to leave the session. And I'm willing to stay as long as there's people in the chat or in the Zoom session wanting to talk about something. So I think that helps. And I've also started this week, just during that time at the beginning of the class where you're still waiting for people to join and the class time hasn't started yet, just posting something fun that will create sort of a general discussion, because on Zoom, it's harder to have those breakout conversations like you can in the classroom. So you're really involving everybody who's joined. So like this morning, there was a picture from the local paper. There was a mountain lion that was spotted in a tree in downtown. And so I put that picture up on, on my slide deck before class started. And I said, does anybody else have any memorable wildlife spottings while in Boulder? And I think that also kind of helps them make that connection to the community that, so it still feels like, they're part of that community. I think within the class itself, providing discussion questions to guide the breakout groups is important. And I found that it works better if you can create a Google Doc that can be shared among the students so that you can put the link into the chat box, they can click on the link, they have access to those discussion questions as they move into their breakout rooms. And I found that is necessary because once you start those breakout rooms, they no longer see your slide deck if you were sharing your slide deck beforehand. And then I try to come around to the discussion, the breakout rooms as well, and participate just like I would in the classroom. So those are a few things.
Thank you. Yeah, I really love the tip you have on the social perspective of the class community. I think that has been a little bit missing in the online environment. I love that the topic you posed to have students engage before the class. And I know some instructors do question of the day just to guide people talk to each other and also feel connected. So yeah, appreciate that. All right, I think those are all my questions for you for now. There may be more. And at the same time, I will end the poll and also share the results with the group so all of you can see how we are doing in terms of online teaching right now. So yeah, just a good sense of the whole teaching community, how we are dealing with the situation.
Looks great. So thank you for those poll results. And I have some questions for you, Linlin. And actually, I just want to mention one other feature from Zoom that I think works well for interaction during the class. And that's the poll feature, which you just used, right? The way I like to do that in class is actually present a question, have students respond, and then I share the results and then we discuss. This is just a formative opportunity for them to kind of do a knowledge check on some of the concepts that maybe weren't assigned reading for that day. And I found that it works better if I present one question at a time, have the discussion around that question, then move on to the next question, rather than trying to put like 5 or 10 questions out there at once. So that was something that I've learned. But Linlin, I'm really curious to sort of get your perspective as somebody who works with course teams who are creating courses for online degree programs. And obviously that's different than the situation I'm in right now. You have more time to plan ahead and to be more conscious about some of the choices that you make. So what would be some advice that you have for running live synchronous sessions based on how those are used in the online programs that you help create?
Yeah, great question. So as you mentioned, since we have more design and development time to put those courses online, so actually for the online degree courses on Coursera right now, 80 or 90% of the content is asynchronous with a goal to serve learners from different time zones with different schedules. And around 10% of the content is delivered in a synchronous live session fashion. But though it's only 10%, it has been so crucial for the learner success. We have surveyed our learners and asked them, what's your favorite activity among all those online materials and things you do? And they rank live session as #1. So I really see live session plays 3 big roles in learner success. First of all, it's kind of coming back to the learning objectives. When you want to teach some higher order thinking skills like analyze a result and apply a new skill to a different scenario or create something based on what you have learned. Sometimes those teaching only happen in conversations, only happen when students have an idea, you give them feedback and then you build upon on each other. So it's really hard to do a pre-recorded fashion. So in those cases, we see live sessions has been fabulous to have engaging conversation and has a lot of ideas bouncing around. And second, we see live session is a great way to provide personalized support, especially we see a lot of instructors do live session in a format of virtual office hour. So that means like it's not one-to-many, it's more like every student can sign up for 15 to 20 minutes slot and just talk to me about your struggles, all the things you don't quite understand. So as an instructor, I can give you multiple examples to explain the things from different perspectives. So I think that's a good opportunity to give this personalized, customized scaffolding in an online format. And finally, I think to your point, lab session is a great community building and enhancement tool because currently I think a lot of students feel a little bit isolated in the situation. They feel I only interact with the device, with the content, and not really learning from a human being. Mm-hmm. So with the live session, they can see your presence, they can see their peers' presence. It's just a great way to support each other and remind us of the human perspective of learning. So I see those are the critical roles live session plays.
So Linlin, could you talk a little bit more about some of the sizes of these live sessions that are typical of the courses you work with? Mm-hmm. And do you see, is there an ideal size for the live sessions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So, and also I see in the polling results, a lot of us are dealing with class in different sizes right now. So hopefully that could be a little bit relevant for all of us. So I see live sessions very small from 1 to 20 students. And also I see live sessions from 20 to 100. And also I see more like a webinar type of live session with 100 plus students. So I will say overall, anything under 100 will be ideal. When it's go beyond 100, it's more like a webinar and more like a broadcast. You don't get too much feedback and reaction from the audience besides the Q&A. So I think that could be beneficial if you invite some guest speaker and do a conversation or do a dialogue together. But if you want to have very immediate conversation or interaction with your students, then I don't recommend going beyond 100. And when you have like a 30 to 100, it's still a pretty good, big class to manage. In those cases, to Adam's earlier point, we highly recommend breakout groups. So you can put your class into smaller groups, and the learners can leverage the peer-to-peer interaction and have more active thinking there. And if you have the privilege to have several TAs supporting you, then you can assign TA to each breakout group, and they can help facilitate a conversation and also bring important questions back to you as the instructor. So you kind of know what's going on in the class, even it's kind of like 80 or 90 people in total. But if you have a smaller class size, like just under 30, then you will be lucky. You can do both class-wide discussion and also breakout groups. We see both mechanisms working well in a smaller class size.
That's great. Just to follow up on that, because from my experience, just trying to teach a class with almost 40 students, that seems to be my limit just in terms of the technology, because I could still see everybody's picture on my computer in front of me, and I can still feel like I'm talking with them and looking at them as I do that. If it got beyond 40, I would think that would be harder. Are you using Zoom for these live sessions? Are there other tools that some of the course teams use, or what is your thought on how to manage that technology in a way that is effective during the live sessions?
Yeah, so on Coursera, all the live sessions are delivered on Zoom. And in terms of the operational side or the management side, we see TAs play a big role here. So instructor can be the content expert and focusing on the content and focusing on the interaction with the students. And TA kind of plays the role Dennis is doing right now to monitor the chat, to go through learners' feedback and to surface important issues to the instructor. So I think having 1 or 2 students support you in those live sessions could be super helpful, and also can reduce some mental workload for you. So you don't need to worry about the operational side of the technology. You can focus more on teaching and engaging.
And what about beyond the live sessions? Are there other opportunities for the students to interact with the instructors, maybe during virtual office hours or something? What do you recommend for that?
Yeah, so virtual office hour definitely is one of those. And also I see some instructors use discussion forum a lot. They post a question a day for students to share their answers. And also they hold, some instructors even hold this discussion forum virtual office hour. So people don't talk to each other in that office hour, but you can see instructors pretty actively online and address questions from students. Sometimes we see instructors also post a picture of themselves in a discussion forum to give that kind of human connection. So I think that's another great way to engage with students, especially if you have students who speak English as a second language, or you know they will be a little bit shy to really speak up in a video conferencing setup. Then discussion forum is a great way for them to share their opinions, and you will be surprised like how thoughtful and thorough they are in the written response. So I will say discussion forum is another great way, and also you can just dedicate a time to have that discussion, let's say every Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. Then you don't kill yourself by being on discussion forum all day, all week.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And something you just said reminded me of something I wanted to share, and that's the opportunities. And I think you raised this question earlier. I don't think I fully answered it, but the opportunities with Zoom. One of those has been that we now have this chat box where students who may have been a little hesitant to talk in the large in-person class are now able to just type their thoughts into the chat box and participate that way, in addition to unmuting their mic and jumping into the conversation. So I think that is another opportunity and even a benefit perhaps of this situation. One thing that I found is really helpful is to ask for 1 or 2 students to volunteer as the chat box monitors at the beginning of the session. That way they can focus on, reading what's coming in the chat box. You can focus on your lecture if you're lecturing or guiding the discussion, and then have them jump in and voice by unmuting their mic some of the things coming into the chat box. So one of the last things I wanted to talk to you about, Linlin, is team projects. How do you manage team projects for these online classes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in our situation, the learners are purely online, so they don't know each other before the class. So in those cases, we found actually it's great to give students more time to just get familiar with each other and build trust before we throw them into a team project. So with that being said, if your course, let's say, is 10 weeks long, then don't start the team project until week 5. So students have enough time to know who is on the class and who they want to work with and what are the strengths of each person, so how they can assemble a great team. And another thing is, for online collaboration, actually it requires special skills and special tools, and we cannot expect students know that just naturally by themselves. So give them a little bit tips or guidance, what tools they should use for video conferencing, what tools they should use for collaborative document editing, and what is a good way to project manage and make sure everyone is accountable. So if you can give some tips from the instructor perspective, it will increase the efficiency of teamwork a lot. And finally, I think just like face-to-face collaboration, we want to evaluate not only the results of the team project, but also the process of the team project. We want to give credits on people's collaboration skills, communication skills. So when we design the assessment, we try to take that into consideration. Partial credits or grades are given to peer evaluation, how you evaluate your peers' performance in this collaboration process. So I think those are something we learned that could be very effective for online team projects.
That's great. And along those lines, in my classes, and of course we've had the benefit of not having to move online until 2/3 through the semester. So everybody knows each other already, and we had those relationships established before we moved online. But every week I have a group of students sort of run the Friday class, and they're in charge of recapping some of the key ideas and guiding the discussion for that class. And I found that this was sort of a natural transition in many ways to the Zoom sessions, because they're still able to share, a slide deck if they have a slide presentation. And it gets them involved a little bit more in those live Zoom sessions as well. So I thought that was useful. I think with that, Dennis, we're going to just open it up to questions and see what everybody is thinking about who is here today. And has anything come in the chat box that we should jump off with?
Yeah, so we've had some great questions. Some have been entered into Q&A, and I've tried to type answers. If I answered your question, but you don't think that I answered it fully or it was addressed by one of these guys speaking, please, my apologies, and let me know. Otherwise, I know one question left in the chat box is a question around whether or not you need a Zoom Pro account for breakout rooms. So if anybody knows the answer to that, let us know. And then also I would, a question just came in about the challenges. Teachers don't know how to use the virtual tools. There are serious problems with students with disabilities in virtual environments, with hearing, vision, autism, Asperger's, etc. And teachers are struggling with the redesigning of evaluations and the feedback. So do you guys want to address perhaps maybe the accessibility, and this might be both for accessibility and the challenges for teachers, Adam, in moving to this environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I can speak a little bit to the accessibility issue. I think given the very rapid shift, there is no perfect solution to that, but I have learned some quick dirty workarounds from my peer instructors. So one thing you can do is, if you do pre-recorded videos, then if you upload that to YouTube, you can get this automatic captioning, so that can help with some accessibility in a cheap and quick way. So when students watch the video, they have more flexibility to pause, rewind, and also they can see the caption, and probably they can help with the situation a little bit. And also definitely leverage the resources you have on campus. I know most universities have this accessibility office that have great resources they can support you, or they can direct students to. So connect with them and see if you can get additional support from that end.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just another note, Zoom, if you were to create a Zoom session and you are the only person in that session, you could give your lecture and have it recorded. And Zoom also has an automatic transcription system. So that could potentially be leveraged. And I think just as a general rule, whenever you're lecturing, it's important, even if you're in a live classroom, to always be describing the visuals that you might be pointing to. That's just a basic instructional strategy, and it carries over into making that more accessible. So what was the other one, Dennis?
So I think that you may have addressed it, but there was a second part of it that seemed to me to be most focused around the faculty challenges of just approaching the transition.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, right? Is because a lot of us are really trying to master new technology right now while we're trying to shift to this online teaching. And the students are as well. And I think that's important to keep in mind, is that the students are going through the same thing you are. And what I would encourage you to do is just, let the students know that you are, I mean, it's cliche now, but we're all in this together, right? So let them know that you are navigating this. This is a sort of an experiment in many ways, and that not everything's going to go smoothly. And get their feedback. Ask them frequently what's working for them, where are they having problems accessing things, using the technology, and try to address those together. And hopefully that would be a learning experience for everyone. I mean, I know even though I've been using Zoom for over a year, I'm learning all sorts of new things about Zoom over the past few weeks that I wasn't aware of. So it's an ongoing learning curve here, but I think just being patient, acknowledging that none of us are masters of this, and don't blame the students for technology problems. That was an interesting comment that a student made to me the other day when I asked them for feedback, how things are going. And I think they said, because I said I was going to be talking with some people, other professors and faculty, and they said, could you share with them to not blame the students if technology problems are people are struggling with that, because everybody here is learning. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We've got two related questions here, actually, from Lydia and Nicola on breakout rooms again. So how do you share a document and let the students write in breakout rooms? And how do students bring documents that they may have been annotating in the breakout rooms back to the whole class? And I will also post, if I can quickly find a Zoom support article on it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I do personally is I just use Google Docs. And you can set the sharing settings on the Google Docs so that it's accessible. Whoever has the link can edit it. And then I put the link to that Google Doc in the chat box before I start the breakout rooms. Or if you're already in a breakout room, this is something I learned the other day as well. If you put something in the chat box, it's not going to go out to the entire class. It's only going to go out to the people in the breakout room that you're currently in. So there is a broadcast button on Zoom if you want to broadcast a message to everybody while they're in the breakout rooms. But through one of those ways, you can share with them links to, Google Docs or Google Sheets that people can edit together. And then you'll have access to that, not just during the breakout room, but after the breakout room as well. And then if you wanted, they could share their screen to show what they've done.
Yeah, I will echo Adam. Just create a Google Doc as the digital home base for your entire live session and lay out when students should do what and links to different breakout room Google Docs. So if students get lost for any reason, they can always go back to this home base and figure out what they should do right now.
Thank you, guys. And so, okay, we have a couple just in. What would you recommend? Oh, sorry. How to keep MIA students engaged, especially with the group projects, if you have students who aren't showing up.
Yeah, I would send them an email. I actually spent some time this week. I had a few students who haven't shown up after spring break, and I just wanted to check in with them and say, please let me know what your situation is. I realize maybe you've moved somewhere different. You may not have reliable internet connection. Let me know. Let's work out a way that we could help you successfully complete this semester. So, Linlin, what do you have for that? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I will go with a similar suggestion as you. Don't make any assumptions at the beginning, just to follow up with the students to understand what's the reason, what happened, and then see how we can better support them. Is that a technology issue, or is that more like a psychological issue they are dealing with? And then probably we can direct them to different resources and go through this together.
Thank you, guys. Julietta has a question in Q&A about if a student has more than 5 classes online, sometimes he or she feels that all the teachers are sending lots of homework without explanation. How can we stimulate them to widen their opportunities to do research, keep asking their doubts, respecting the office hours? And this is at the high school level. So it's, I guess, a combination of workload and then sort of teaching them to be a little more self-sufficient as they live into this process.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, especially that first one. I think it's important that you are, if you have a learning management system, you're using that to keep the assignments up to date, and let that, you need some sort of central organizing place for the students, for you, so they can go to that and see exactly what assignments are coming up, when they're due, how to contact you if they have any questions about that. Because I know that is a frustration that students have that I've talked with this week, is that some classes, professors are emailing assignments, they're posting them on Canvas, maybe they're not up to date on Canvas, that they don't know what's due when, and especially as things are shifting now. So try to provide as much continuity as possible. Start with what you already have, the system that you already have, and try to use that now in this new setting, or adapt something, adapt that to the new situation in some way, but communicate with your students frequently so that they understand what is happening. So if learning management systems obviously is a good way to do that.
Yeah, and also on the workload side, for the first-time online students and even for the first-time online teachers, we actually recommend reducing your workload a little bit. So probably just 80% of the regular workload you may have for the in-person teaching, because be conscious, like we are also learning the new technology and dealing with this new situation. So people have a lot of cognitive workload on their mind. So if you can reduce the workload a little bit, it will give learners an easy transition into the new situation, and you will have a better learning outcomes as well.
And I just want to emphasize that as well. This should not be adding to the students' workload at this point. Moving online should not add to their workload. You know, if anything, it should be reduced, like Linwood said.
Thank you. I just remind folks, if you have a question, it looks like, unless I'm missing it, nobody's raising their hand. So you are welcome to just paste it in the Q&A, and I'll also try and keep an eye on the chat. Lori notes that teachers can also send messages on the same day of the week. That would help in time management for the teacher and students, plus offer a sense of consistency.
Yes, and please, we want other people to share their ideas like Lori did. There's a lot of knowledge out here among the people on this webinar today. So please feel free to type in what you've done into the chat box so that we could all benefit from that.
Earlier on in the chat, there was a little bit of discussion quickly about proctoring and exams. Adam, can you, and Linlin, can you speak to how you've approached assessment in this environment?
Yeah, you know, as I said, my situation, I was really lucky because I already used the online quizzes on our learning management system. So that hasn't changed for me now in this new situation, but our university is now moving towards a system that is providing proctored online exams. And there are some ways to do that, but I think that would have to be done at the institutional level to try to facilitate that. Linlin, do you have any ideas from the online courses that you've helped create? How do they proctor the exams?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you mentioned, that's kind of institution level decision, and there are several proctor exam providers out there. So Coursera, we work with ProctorU, and the learners can sign up for their exam slot and get this webcam on to have the exam. At the same time, we have been integrated with the Turn-in plagiarism checker for their assessments. So definitely check with your institution and see if they already partner with any vendors like this that you can leverage. And also to Adam's point, if you are using LMS, you can explore the functionalities of LMS. Sometimes LMS may have a timed exam. That means learners have to finish the quiz within certain time period. That's a good way to ensure the academic rigor as well. So feel free to get in touch with your teaching and learning team and see if they have some tutorials about LMS that can help you to ensure the academic rigor in your course.
And I would also encourage you to consider alternative assessment opportunities at this point, if you haven't already. So for example, for my course, students work on a final project, and I allow them to create the type of artifact that sort of aligns with their creativity and their background. So if they want to create a video, and they're able to do that. If they want to create a podcast, they can do that rather than just writing a traditional paper. And I think in this time, there would be that opportunity as we've moved online. If you normally are having students do a write-up or maybe even a presentation, maybe give them the opportunity to record a short video of themselves talking about that topic instead, just to kind of ease the cognitive stress from everything else that's going on in their lives.
Thank you. Question from Melania about any recommendations for teaching languages. She says, you know, English or French, for example, online, and you guys can answer it. And then again, as Adam suggested, I encourage folks to answer in chat if they have suggestions as well.
Yeah, so for language learning or teaching, I know a big part of that is to really practice and then get feedback from the experts. So I see some instructors have been creative in that. I know for a Chinese language learning course on Coursera, the instructor asked students to do a dialogue with their peers, either in person or virtually, and then record a dialogue and then upload that as the assignment. And you can do that either as an instructor graded assignment or a peer review or graded assignment. So in that way, students can still have this practical experience and demonstrate their mastery of the language. And at the same time, these recorded materials will give you good opportunities to really carefully see where they could be improved in the dialogue in terms of the words they choose or the tone they have. So it's a great way to for you to give feedback. So just some creative ways I have learned from other instructors on Coursera.
Yeah, and I love that idea. And if students have access to Zoom, they could just do that through Zoom and record it easily through the Zoom features. I would also recommend some of the flashcard apps that are out there. So Quizlet, I know there's others, but either you could create those yourself or you could have students create those flashcards. So if they're practicing vocabulary, those tools would be available to them online or on their mobile phone.
Thank you. I want to thank Eleanor from Michigan in chat for posting a link to Michigan's Keep Teaching site. That is an incredible resource. Duke also has a Keep Teaching site. I'm sure, you know, many others do as well, but those really are phenomenal resources. So thank you, and check out those links in chat. Juan brings up any suggestion to teach lab skills in STEM subjects, and I know this had come up in the question submitted in advance as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think our suggestion will be, first of all, revisit your learning objectives for the lab work. Do you want students to observe the experiment and analyze the data, or do you want them more practice the skills on how to operate with the equipment? If it's more on the observation or data analysis side, probably you can use some online simulation, or you can have yourself or TA record you do the experiment and then have the video watched by the students, and then they observe and then they use the data you provide to do the analysis. So they can kind of partially achieve your learning objectives in an alternative way. And also, if you feel you really need students to get hands-on and play with those materials, think about if there are some supplementary materials or substitute materials learners can find at home to redo that experiment. And also, I know there are several websites providing those kind of lab kit for learners to use at home. But I think coming back to the accessibility issue, not every learner can get that timely. So if you choose that option, just be conscious about whether students can have that, and also when you need students to have that material.
And I also wanted to make a pitch for a course that we have on Coursera. Eileen Kennedy from University of London and her colleagues have put together a course called Get Interactive Practical Teaching with Technology. And it's a nice short course that if you go through it, you can get some more ideas on different tools that you can use to help with your online teaching. And maybe Eileen is here in the participants. I don't know if she has anything else she wants to chime in and say about that.
Okay, we have a question about from Mercedes. I teach architectural design, and we're having trouble at preparing activities for students to show their productions. It's even harder to figure out how to assist them in the process. Any advice here?
So again, maybe they could do some sort of recording. I mean, is this where they typically would do an in-class presentation? kind of walk through their design with visuals in class, if that's the case, and feel free to add additional context here. But you know, if that's the case, maybe they could do a recording of that, and then you could post the recordings on your learning management system. You could do a peer review off of that. You could review them as the instructor. You know, I don't know. Any other ideas out there for people on this one?
Okay, we'll let some folks add any suggestions there into chat. Thank you so much. And we have another question about, I teach listening and speaking to teens, and I do not master online teaching devices. Any suggestions for my classes? So this would be around something that is really, yeah, you know, native first and foremost to an interpersonal exercise.
Yeah. You know, I think everybody's obviously sort of gravitated towards Zoom and the video conferencing, but I think it's also important to remember we still have telephones. You know, if you were to set up just like a Google Voice number that you could use just for your class, that might be a way to facilitate some smaller group discussions or even one-on-one discussions with students that way.
Great. I think we also have a comment from Silvina here about, back to the assessment chat actually, that she and her partner send the quizzes via email or WhatsApp chats, but don't tell our students it's a quiz, so they work alone. If folks have other interesting tips about this, please feel free to put them into the chat so that we can share them with the fellow attendees. That's great. Any other questions I've mixed? I believe we're still waiting for an answer. I couldn't find it on quick search. I'm so sorry, Catherine, about whether or not you need a Zoom Pro account for breakout rooms. I think, I know that there are time limits to meetings. If you don't have the Zoom Pro account, that might be even a bigger challenge to running a full class online, since it restricts how long the class can go. But if anybody has an answer to that they can put in the chat, that would be wonderful too. Here's one that was sent in before the session that I think is definitely something for us to address. How do you cope with the psychological aspects of the transition to online learning? Many students are very anxious, and teachers have a feeling of internal resistance from encountering new technologies. You guys have some thoughts on that?
You know, I think that's probably the biggest challenge right now, is trying to deal with that, both from the faculty perspective, if you're not used to these tools, but also largely from the students' perspective. And I think, you know, I've seen sort of a drop in morale among students, and they've even told me this, especially after they came back from spring break. It seemed like we had this energy before spring break, even as we shifted online. They went away for a week, they went home, they dealt with their family situation. A lot of them are, you know, dealing with job situations, so they might not have their job anymore. And we come back after spring break, and it was a slow start this week, you know, to be honest. But, you know, I think as much as possible, you need to try to make that connection with them and just be there for them, not just for helping them learn the material, but let them know that, you know, you are there to talk with them and work with them, you know, around the situations that they're dealing with. And, you know, I have one student who's dealing with housing and job issues. And I said, that needs to take priority right now. Figure that out. And we're going to figure out a way around that to make sure you successfully complete this semester. So I think flexibility is really key, and just kind of approaching this with compassion, right?
Yeah, fully agreed. And also I think it's important to acknowledge that feelings and let people know this is very normal. Everyone is having more or less this feeling too. And also probably a little bit deep on why you feel the low morale. Is that due to the isolated feeling of staying at home, or is that due to the low productivity you feel you no longer, now you have compared to what you have in the school? So with that problem in mind, we can provide more tailored support. So for learners feel less productivity, probably we can suggest them having a dedicated learning place at home, and also have probably a small study group, even virtually, to keep each other accountable every day by finishing some task. And also a small tip, I know some instructors will create a permanent Zoom link that is available and open 24-hour every day. And that's kind of like a chat room for students just to hop on, connect, and talk with each other whenever they have a need. So that's another small tip you may use to probably keep the keep the community engaged in this online setting.
And I would also say, if it works for your situation, if you can continue to meet at the same class times. I found that in my situation, that continuity was really appreciated by the students. A lot of their other classes are now going to asynchronous models, and that sort of adds to the disruption that they're experiencing. And so I think since they already have that time set aside for their schedules, being able to use that to interact, even if you don't use it in the same way you did, if you had a large lecture class, maybe you just use that time for open office hours or open chat time or discussion time, but if you could sort of harness that schedule that you had before and try to provide some sort of continuity, I think that's helpful. And at least going forward, you want to try to create a weekly rhythm that you can stick with so that it's not different every week for the students.
Thank you, guys. So we have a couple of minutes left on the official time. Could I suggest that I think we have a poll that we'd love most attendees to get. So maybe we could send out the poll now, but we're happy to stay on and continue answering the questions that have been posted here and go past the hour. We understand many of you might have to leave, and that's fine. All registrants and attendees will get the link to the recorded version of this so you can catch any of the Q&A that you might happen to miss. And so I think Adam has just put up the post-webinar survey. If you could take a second, we would really appreciate you answering that.
And I've also put a link in the chat box to just some notes that I put together as a PDF document. So some of the things we talked about today, some of the things we didn't get to. I think, the most important thing to keep in mind is start where you're at. You're not designing a new course from scratch in this case. This is different from the type of work that Linlin has talked about. You don't have that advanced notice, obviously. So take what you have, find ways to adapt it to the current situation. And I know, at least for us, we're almost to the end of the semester. I think many of us are in that situation, and we'll get there. And then I guess we'll figure out what to do after that, right, for the fall.
Thank you, Adam. So we will continue with a few more questions for the folks who can stay on. We have a question from Romy. How do you choose an alternative online assessment when having a proctored multiple choice exam isn't possible due to a very large group size?
I know maybe Linlin can talk a little bit more about our peer review system at Coursera, but I think that can also be harnessed through your learning management system potentially. So like I know on the Canvas learning management system, you can create assignments that are peer reviewed, and you could require maybe 2 students to review that particular submission or something. And that could help you triangulate some feedback at the very least, even if you want to then go in and draw from that feedback to actually assign the grade. Linlin, what would you say about the peer review?
Yeah, I think peer review is a great mechanism to, first of all, get assessment grades at large scale. And also, I think it's a great learning opportunity for peers to see each other's work and get different perspectives or inspirations. Don't feel like it's just kind of putting the grading burden on the student's shoulder, but actually is another learning opportunity for them too. And also to Adam's earlier point, I think we can consider if we can have alternative assessment, if cheating or plagiarism is a concern for the existing assessment you designed for the in-person teaching. So alternative assessments could be open-ended and could really shine the creativity of the students and also avoid the potential copy and paste or plagiarism cases.
And let me just throw another comment out there, something kind of radical. Just trust your students. And I think it's easier to do in a smaller class where you have a personal relationship with those students. But, you know, whenever I put a quiz on their learning management system, I put the honor code up there and they read that and they say, yes, I agree to abide by that. And then, you know, I trust them to have done that. And I think you know, that's another thing to consider. Obviously, if you have a larger lecture class, that maybe is different, but.
You know, that's related to something Diana typed in. Maybe we old age teachers think our students are having a hard time adapting to the new ways of teaching, and it is quite the opposite. They'll enjoy this tendency and will find the traditional ways boring and old fashioned. What do you think? And so folks can chime in on that on Zoom, but I think that's related to the trust the students. So thank you, Adam. We had a question about technical glitches during live sessions. How do you deal with them? For example, once our microphones didn't work, we had to quit the session and start again.
Yeah, I think prepare your students for that up front and just ask for their patience. You know, especially since everybody now is on Zoom, there could potentially be those spotty internet issues. So just be prepared for it. Ask for the students to sort of navigate that with you and to be patient around those issues and work through them. It's not perfect, right? And I think, you know, another thing to think about here is that when you're doing these live Zoom sessions, this shouldn't be about trying to perform. It's really about connection. And so just think about the ways that you can create that connection and don't worry if it's a little rough around the edges.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Erica around just sharing ideas about creative online feedback.
You mean from the instructors to the students or from the peer-to-peer feedback?
Erica, if you're still here, you can, oh, both. She says both. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think in terms of creative ways to give feedback, I have seen some instructors to record a video by to give feedback instead of a written format feedback, because in the video you can have richer context in terms of the feedback, and especially when you point out the constructive feedback, the things you think students didn't do very well and could be further improved. In the video format, actually you can make that more approachable, more friendly, and frame that in a way like students feel this is helpful for them. So I have seen a lot of great video feedback has been delivered in the online format.
And I know with at least the Canvas learning management system with the speed grader feature, I think you have the opportunity to insert audio feedback rather than typing out comments. And I haven't personally used it, but I know colleagues who have tried it. So that's another way. If you find it tedious trying to type out feedback comments, consider using, you know, the audio or the video like Linlin mentioned.
Yeah, and in terms of peer-to-peer feedback, we found it's important to give students some guiding questions. Basically, the questions they need to answer when they review their peers' work or give feedback. So through the questions, you can frame the tone. For example, usually the instructor will ask students, could you share one thing that your peer does really well in their work? So make sure there is a piece of positive feedback in the overall evaluation. And also the question could be, could you share one area your peer can be further improved or could have done even better in the future, and then ensure there is a piece of constructive feedback in the evaluation. So I think as an instructor, we can really guide students to give effective feedback.
Yeah, and creating that rubric is really central, not just to the feedback, but also, as Linlin mentioned earlier, allowing the students to actually learn from that opportunity of providing feedback. So if you create a really structured, well-structured rubric, it's going to facilitate the feedback that they give, and it's going to facilitate their learning process from that.
Thank you. I know Luis was asking more information about how to address difficulties with students with disabilities. So I know that this was brought up earlier, and Linlin counseled to first order of business should probably be to check with your accessibility office on campus. But that in general, accessibility challenges and digital divide challenges are kind of top of mind as institutions transition from what has been sort of an emergency triage response to looking ahead to something that is more sustainable and equitable moving forward. So I think probably the real answer is that there are some real challenges and speed bumps regarding things like accessibility just due to the rush online. I was happy to see, I think just yesterday maybe, that the National Council for Online Education was formed, specifically to try and ensure that this quick move to online learning is followed by and sort of easing into what will be more support for faculty, more access to best practices. And that includes some founding member organizations that are very concerned with accessibility. So that's great to see too. With that, if I have missed any questions in chat, please feel free to drop it into the Q&A button, but we may have actually completed all of the questions.
And I think just to follow up on that last point about students with disabilities, it is important to recognize that if you do have students with disability plans, those plans are now going to shift, right? So you need to sort of revisit that. Maybe you set up a plan at the beginning of the semester based on the in-class environment, but now you need to rethink how that is going to play out. So something definitely to be aware of. And talk with your students, talk with your disability office to help facilitate that.
Okay, well, Adam and Linlin, I want to thank you both so much for having the conversation with each other. And I want to thank everybody who was able to join. This is really incredible. I know this is just the beginning and part of a much larger conversation that will be ongoing, but we really appreciate the sense of community and coming together so we can talk about this. And so I'm sure that conversation will continue. Until next time, on behalf of Coursera, I would like to just say thank you very much and best of luck as you continue your efforts at education during the crisis.